Hi everyone, and welcome to today's session on the Indian National Digital Health Blueprint from paper to practice. So thank you all for joining us today, and thank you to our speakers and moderator for the session today. We have Dr. Pankaj Gupta from Access Health Digital. We have Ajay Sharma from Srishti Software, Priyanka Yadav from Access Health Digital, Rohit Raeja from Universal Mednet, Dr. Shravan Subramaniam from Roche Diagnostics, and our moderator today is Varun Vegas from Roche Diagnostics. Next, please. So before we start, I would like just to share a very simple technical instruction. If you have any question, please use the chat. And we will answer those questions at the end of the presentation during our panel discussion. Next, please. So as some of you know, this webinar is part of the APACMed Digital Health Committee. This is a new initiative for the APACMed Association that we launched about 6 months ago at the beginning of this year. Now the committee has more than 30 companies and 100 individuals from large multinational companies, SMEs, and startups. And our objective is to create and share knowledge around digital health, and of course, as a trade association, to advocate for regional policies that can enable digital health in our region. So as you can see on this slide, we are focusing on several aspects of digital health. And during the webinar today, we are going to cover all of them. So I'm really excited to learn more about the digital health blueprint, because we are going to discuss about cybersecurity, interoperability, reimbursement, and regulatory challenges on digital in India. So that said, I will just give the floor to Varun for his opening remarks. Thank you, Varun.
Thank you very much, Roberta. So thank you everyone for joining us today for this very important webinar. We are really excited to hear today from our esteemed speakers and panelists. And why this webinar is important is India is a must-win market for most of us. And it's also an important market for APAC Med as well. And that being said, the Indian government has been really busy putting out a lot of documents around digital health and what the ecosystem is going to look like in the near future. So we will be hearing a lot more today from Access Health, as well as our panelists, around how this journey should shape in the future, as well as what we as a trade association can do as an industry to make this a reality. So if we talk about digital health, why do we really need it, especially in the Indian context, is all about, patient, giving the patient the control of their own data, their health data, which will eventually enable better clinical decision support in a clinical setting for the clinicians, as well as enabling healthcare providers to treat more patients and deliver quality outcomes as well. We would like the whole system to work seamlessly, all the facets coming together to make sure we achieve that vision of providing, personalized healthcare for every patient in India. Now, from a policy perspective, we also envision that, policymakers make use of, these vast data lakes that are being created in India. And these are used for eventually regulatory decisions as well as, reimbursement. So we look forward to hearing from Dr. Pankaj Gupta from Access Health. And I would like to hand it over to you, Dr. Pankaj.
Thank you, Varun. As Varun already set the stage for me, then we are going to be talking about the National Digital Health Blueprint. It is a document that was released in November 2019 by Government of India, but the work has been going on that for a pretty long time. Next. Let me talk a little bit about who Access Health is and then jump into the nuts and bolts of the blueprint. Access Health is a not-for-profit entity. It is headquartered in the US. We work in 5 different countries, and we work very closely with the government on health policy, on the public health side as well as on digital health. Digital health sort of sits in the center of healthcare delivery, health insurance, and health finance, health policy. Next. The Department of Digital Health was constituted about a year and a half back because we thought that, the digital health is going to be a part and parcel of every program in the public health and in the private health going forward. So to take a very, focused view, the Department of Digital Health was created. After that, the Social Entrepreneurship Accelerator was born, where we brought in 25 digital health companies to work with us to implement all the digital health blueprint that the government has put together. And then we have a center of excellence where we have experts who help in implementation and who are the guiding light for many of these implementation that we do. Next. Here is a journey. So what happened is, before 2008, in about 2005, the National Rural Health Mission was created, and every different disease-based vertical program put together an IT system of their own. These IT systems did not talk to each other. They were created in different technologies at different points in time, different standards or no standards. So when they did not talk to each other, because they were never designed to talk to each other, but the need for bringing all those different data pieces arose. My favorite example is that if there was a woman who had tuberculosis in the past and she delivers a low birth weight baby today, there is no way you can trace it back, because all of the different data pieces will be in different systems and they are not going to connect with each other. So that is the reason when Modi government came in 2014, they put it as part of their agenda, and they said we are going to bring e-health in the forefront. In fact, they put it as an election agenda in the last election when they got re-elected. And in this journey of last 6 years, there's been a total transformation on the regulatory aspects of digital health in India. So it is being led on the Digital India program, which is the Trinity, as we call it, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and Mobile. Jan Dhan is the universal ID of all citizens in India, which is, in India, we call it as Aadhaar. And then Jan Dhan is the, there is these bank accounts that have been created for all the bottom of the pyramid people. About 300 million plus bank accounts have been created. And then we have the mobile, which is a tool which has sort of transformed the entire digital India in, the program itself has got transformed because of the mobile. Today we have 1 billion plus mobiles in India, and there are about 300 million plus Jan Dhan accounts. And then you have the UID, which is Aadhaar. Again, about 98% of Indians are covered in the UID. So obviously it is a moving target because people are dying, people are getting born, people are migrating. So it will never become 100%, but we are nearly there. So that has become the basis of the transformation for healthcare also. Now in National Digital Health Blueprint, what has been said earlier, it was called the National Health Stack. Now in 2019, the Government of India came out with the National Digital Health Blueprint, which is an architecture document in terms of how do you put all the different systems together. Because that, remember, that was the issue in 2005, that the systems couldn't talk to each other. And then in India, healthcare is a state subject. So how do you bring the different states to work with the central government? So a federated architecture was put in place. And this is the blueprint where there are standards, there is design principles, and there is a federated architecture that has been put in place. So I'll explain that a little. Now, Ayushman Bharat is the universal health coverage that was announced by Prime Minister Modi to sort of take India from a pay out of pocket model to a universal health coverage model. before Ayushman Bharat was announced, India's health insurance coverage was only 3% of India's population. Plus the government health insurance program, which is another about 10%, you could take it to about 13%. But Ayushman Bharat is set to cover 40% of India's population. And then you add the other government insurance programs, so it becomes about 60% of India's population. So that's going to get covered under this massive program. And because of the size and scale of the program, it cannot be done manually any longer. Obviously, you need the digital health backbone to be able to get the claim in a standard format. It is a machine readable object. It will have to be adjudicated by the payer in a very electronic manner. Obviously, there's a journey to go through. It's not going to happen overnight. But then how does this happen is the blueprint which has already been put in place. Imagine starting from primary care, referral to secondary care, referral to tertiary care. And for each one of these steps, the claims have to be put to the insurance. And these insurance claims will have to go completely electronic. And then it'll have to be rendered from the other side. And the payment comes into the bank account of the person. It's if it is completely paperless and cashless, then it has to come, the payment has to come back into the accounts of the respective providers. However, there will be component that the person will also pay, in the preparation to a procedure. There will be outpatient consults, and then follow-up outpatient consults will be there. Even those are something which will be reimbursed by the health insurance component. So this also has to be put in the pocket of the person who's insured. So this is a whole gamut of things which are changing, starting from the provider side to the medical devices to the health insurance platforms, and then it's all going to work seamlessly with each other. So that's the blueprint that we are talking about. Next slide, please. This is a summary of the blueprint that I just sort of outlined. In addition to this blueprint, there's another component that has recently been released, and COVID was the trigger point for making that happen, and that's called the telemedicine guidelines. So telemedicine guidelines have been revised, and that's completely based on the blueprint. The EMR, electronic medical records, have been made mandatory as part of the telemedicine guidelines. And then any linkages to any medical devices, point of care devices, the Internet of Things, that's all going to be governed as part of the National Digital Health Blueprint. Next slide, please. This is the electronic health EHR standards, which were put out earlier in 2016, but then they have been taken forward as part of the National Digital Health Blueprint, because the blueprint gives you the architecture, but then under the architecture, the what and the why, that comes from the EHR standards. Next slide. The metadata standards, which were sort of notified in August 2018, but they were written down much earlier in 2013-14, are giving you the building blocks. So these are the building blocks. So look at it like this, that blueprint is the architecture. Below that is the EHR standard, which is providing the what and the why, and the how is below that, which is the metadata standard. These are the building blocks, very fine grained. Look at it like Lego blocks. So if you have to build a house and you have to use Lego blocks, if you use Lego blocks of different shapes and sizes, they're not going to fit together. So what government has done is it's given you a set of Lego blocks which will fit together seamlessly. You can design your own architecture of your application. As long as it is following these Lego blocks, you're good to go. Next slide. Another thing that the government of India did was in November 2019, as part of the digital health blueprint, the building blocks were written down. And one of the most important building blocks, as we say, is the e-objects. These are for interoperability. Access Health, together with Niti Aayog, wrote a book called Health System for New India. In chapter 5 of this book, the e-objects have been, the concept has been written. I am the co-author for that chapter. And in the e-objects, it's on the provider side, it is on the payer side, and it is on the payment side. So it takes care of all the three, not just the payment side, but also on the provider side. In the provider side, like for example, in telemedicine, if there is an e-prescription that has to go out, so there's a standard e-object available for that. If there is a referral that has to go from a primary to a secondary, so e-referral is available for that. We now call it the e-encounter object. On the IPD side, it is the e-discharge summary, and then linked to that is the e-claim to send the e-claim to the insurance so that they can process the claim and send the money back. Next slide, please. So here are the details, and I will request my colleague Priyanka to take over on that and talk a little bit about the e-objects, because she's the one who's been working on it together with the government, and we have been supporting the government to roll this out. Priyanka.
Thank you, Dr. Pankaj. So we designed e-object. The concept was already adopted by Niti Aayog, but we designed e-object keeping in mind that we have a lot of legacy applications already existing in India. We cannot tell them to go scrap themselves and build new products to be able to comply with NDHB. That is where this NDHB is something that is bridging the gap. So what these e-objects are, they don't ask you to standardize the entire database or the way you have designed your application, but the minimum required information that I need as a payer to pass or fail a claim, if it's a claim object, and minimum required information I need as a provider to be able to take decisions on my patient's health. Those are the things we are asking to be able to standardize. So there are two types of e-object that Dr. Pankaj has already explained. Payer e-objects revolves mostly around UHC or universal health coverage that India is going towards. There will be pre-authorization. It's a completely, what we have done is we have taken all the data libraries by MDDS and we have built minimum required information bundles into e-object, which will be using FHIR for interoperability. So these e-objects will have segments, minimum required segments that I need to auto-adjudicate the claim if it's a payer object. So I don't even have a need unless until it's a complicated case to look at the discharge summary. All the required elements, whether it's billing details, whether it's the procedures done, admission time, and what kind of claim it is, and package details are available here. So similarly, on the provider side, as you already know, all the vertical programs do not talk to each other. All the HDIS applications in India do not talk to each other. I as a patient don't have any control on my data at all. What these e-objects will do, what the application providers are required to be done is, they have to develop these e-objects. Design specifications are already out. They have to implement it, use a translator layer for the minimum standardization required. Generate these e-objects, not only store it in their source system, but also send it on request. Whenever there's a request with patient consent, they will send it across. It will be minimal clinical summary of the patient. For example, if it's an encounter or is a normal OP visit, it will be an e-encounter object, which will have details about presenting complaints. It will have detail about patient history. It will also have details about only active conditions of the patient. So just for the details, we have mentioned all the details that they are capturing. So it's precise a medicals and a claim summary, to be very precise. That is something that is a bare minimum or a building block you require to start the process of standardization and a seamless health information exchange. One more part that these e-object follows is there is a structure to it. The structure is to make them machine readable. It will be divided into two parts. One is header, which will only have identifiers because the government is already working on the registries, which will identify each stakeholders uniquely by providing them unique identification. The header will be the machine readable part that will only have IDs like facility ID, provider license number or ID, patient UHID. So this will decide on who is authorized to open or see or retrieve the information about a patient or a claim. And this is how the interoperability will take place between payer to payer, payer to provider, and provider to provider. This is how the entire concept is. The next slide, please. So as part of the building blocks, what government has put down in NDHB, India was missing the concept of identifying each stakeholder who will be involved in this health information exchange uniquely. Now the government has already started work on these registries, which will be centrally hosted, which will, but again, will be based on the same health data dictionary that we mentioned, so that states and other states and providers will still have options, have flexibility to build their own repositories where they want to keep more information about a stakeholder. Like for example, a state wants to keep more information about a health facility for the PHC he wants to regulate, but the government will keep the minimum required data elements and details that will link to the state level repositories. So the again design is based on MVPs, MDDS, and there will be registries like personal health registry, which will be nothing but a beneficiary registry for all the citizens in India, which will provide them unique UHIDs. Then there will be provider registries, all the license number, all the authorized practitioner who are allowed to practice in India will be listed there, so that they can digitally e-sign for the accountability part of it. Facility registry to just get an overview, and for the e-referral, especially for the referral management and continuity of care, when one facility can refer to other, and we would know where the data was generated and stored. So these are some of the registries that is part of the NDHB. Next slide, please. So till now, why suddenly so much acceleration has taken place is because the levers of change that were missing in India have come to reality today. One, the major financial lever that we have is the PMJ 2.0, which is nothing but Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which is already covering approximately 40% of India's population and providing them free healthcare. So till now, what was happening, because there was the claims were manual, especially when it comes to government payments, the claim can take 5 days to 5 months, and hospitals were run on credit. That is where this lever will play a role. Now government will be coming up with a health claim platform, National Health Authority will be working on it, and everything will be seamless, so that if you are able to generate the e-claim objects, you will get, if there is no conflict, you will get your payment almost immediately or in the turnaround time, because now it will be machine readable. We may not need people to download, read, translate, and then provide you the payment. So that is where it will be a huge incentive. When we were talking to many of the big hospitals, that came across as a huge incentive for everyone, that okay, if I get my payment on time, it will be the greatest step that government can provide them, or the greatest incentive they would want to look forward to. Second is the epidemiological data analysis. Because we were hit by the pandemic COVID, that was the time when government realized that how difficult it was to get the real patient level data. They had no idea because the systems were broken, only aggregated data was being reported. Hence, it acted as a lever of a chain that government has expedited the entire procedure. NDHM, National Digital Health Mission, has already announced who will be the guiding authority to implement NDHB at a national level. Third foremost is accessibility and affordability, which is a primary objective of a universal health coverage. Now, because of digitalization, patient become the owner of the data, and I as a patient will always have access to my data, and I'll be free to share it with whichever provider I want to. That will also increase accessibility and affordability of storing. Everything will be on cloud, and everything becomes very easy for a patient as well as provider to manage the health records. Yeah. Next slide, please. Next. So like I already explained, this is how the structure of the objects would look like. There will be header, which will only have identifiers to identify which are the stakeholder involved, which is the stakeholder who is authorized to see or get this information. It will have a standard segments, which are these minimum required segments of information that I need as a payer or provider, which will be pretty standardized for everyone. It will be implemented nationally. But there can be custom segments. For example, if a specific program would want to use the same concept with an information which they want to use in the close community, they can add those also. And this entire thing is based on the metadata standards, which is the 1,000+ data elements and code directories. What was happening till now is, even though I, as a government, was able to standardize the structure of the discharge summary or claim, the value set that goes in were decided by the particular vendor. The master data was not standardized. So when I want to aggregate this data and make sense out of it, I won't be able to do that without making further efforts. That is where, when MDDS was designed, it already has same value sets, so that the master data is standardized. It's as simple as that, defining gender as male, female, and transgender. Everyone who files for a claim will only use these three value sets. So it becomes easier without a point-to-point integration. It becomes at semantic level, your data is already standardized. And again, these e-objects will be utilizing the FHIR R4 standard for interoperability. Next slide, please. Like I explained, how it will work, the entire workflow. Whenever a patient goes to a hospital under Ayushman Bharat, and to begin with Ayushman Bharat, will undergo a treatment or admission, the e-discharge object and the e-bill that will be generated using the IRDA regulations, all the bill buckets that they have already defined, to be able to form a e-claim object. That e-claim object is the only object that will be sent to the payer for adjudication using a health claim platform, which will act as a router. And it will pick up the e-claim object and it will direct it to the respective payer. And then the payer can choose. Right now, government has kept it open that you can continue with your manual intervention on passing or failing the claim. But by using this over the period of time, automatically it will be taken over by off-the-shelf solutions on claim management, or maybe machine readable rule engine payers can build on top of it to be able to auto adjudicate with minimum manual intervention. Next, please. Yeah. So this is how the claim platform that will be managed by National Health Authority, which manages the PMJ Ayushman Bharat, will work as the e-object will be generated, will be sent through the HCP or the health claim platform, National Health Claim Platform, which will act as router and send it to a respective payer for claim processing. And the entire e-object concept and the e-object design details are already adopted by National Health Authority and was mentioned and published under the IRDA NHA report. And also there is an RFP which has already been put out to be able to find the vendor who will be able to develop and manage this claim platform, as well as the e-objects required to be developed. Yes, next please. Yes, so this is the RFP that has been already out, which becomes a very, very strong financial lever for hospitals to adopt the minimum required standards from a NDHB, from a interoperability, and for faster claim payments. And e-object becomes the core of it. Next, please. Next. So, like Dr. Pankaj already explained, India has around 39 vertical programs. None of them talk to each other because the way they were designed was completely different. And this entire issue was highlighted when we were hit by the pandemic, where, for example, our vulnerable population is all the patients in India that are under the TB program or the RNTCP program. Again, the next vulnerable population is all the RCH or the pregnant mothers. But this information was not readily available for the surveillance response system that we have in India. And actual door-to-door screening using multiple apps were used to be able to get at least some data to identify the vulnerable population that requires screening and can be protected from COVID. That is where this NDHB became a high level, top level issue announced, and NDHM being a digital health ecosystem that can enable the research organization to be able to arrive at treatment guidelines, to be able to arrive at what is the population health of my country, and to handle any further future pandemic. Next, please. So this is just a overview of the provider e-objects. So slowly, steadily, what will happen is all the hospitals, clinics, doctors will be able to generate this minimum required patient summary using these specifications. Hence, the main data, the data may store in this in the source system, but whenever requested, it will be developed in as a JSON format. It will be stored and retrieved on request with a strong patient consent framework in place, so that I don't care if I want to switch doctor, I don't have to worry about my medical record not being available for me. On top of this, all these e-object will become building blocks for a longitudinal health record. Today these are just summaries, but slowly if we are able to put an aggregator service in place at a national level, and we provide fiduciaries, which is already mentioned in the NDHB document, there will be licensed fiduciaries that hospitals can use to push the data they want to store, and there will be regulations around it to be able to store the digital data. The same information, if anonymized, can easily be utilized by ICMR and other research institute to be able to define better treatment guidelines, to be able to define what is the gap where my population is suffering the most from a healthcare perspective. Yes. Next. Next slide, please. The second MVP, or minimum viable product definition, that we have as Access Health, being a not-for-profit and trying to help the community, we have defined as the microservice architecture. Most of it, the NDHB document is based on India architecture, which was published earlier. And it, if you go and read, it is a completely technical document. If you go and read the India architecture, you will come across that microservice is the answer to all the problems for building interoperable, not only interoperable, but more scalable product. It is a switch, it is a change in the technology. Right from a monolith to a microservice architecture will bring down the cost of development. Also, not only cost of development, cost of maintenance, because everything will become flexible. The two giants that are using microservice architecture are Netflix and Amazon, and also Uber. All of us know, have we ever seen Uber going down, even though they keep adding more and more features to it? There is no downtime in it. So this is why we prescribe that if you are building a new product, if you are a startup, you're planning to bring a product in healthcare, please use microservice architecture. What we also did as part of our not-for-profit initiative, we developed these microservice specifications for the minimum required module that a healthcare information system should have, so that you don't even have, we take away the design and thinking cost from you. We have given you everything. This is how, from a workflow to the data elements, from the library of data elements that government has put down, and we have made it very easy for everyone to adopt it, and it will be available with us. It is also part of our social entrepreneurship accelerator program, so that you just have to pick those and design the application. Next, please. So this is how microservices will work. The data elements, the library of data elements that we just discussed earlier, we will pick up the minimum required or logically grouped data elements from there as per the type of module or service I want to build, bundle them into microservices and microservice specification that we publish internally for our SCA members. These smaller microservices will form modules. For example, if there is a module called patient registration, the patient registration module itself can be divided into minor microservices. Like, for example, register patient or delete patient. This is how you define services to a highly granular level, and then you build microservices and which get combined into a module. And these MVP modules, the minimum required modules to run a hospital or a clinic, will form the HDIS MVP. There is some work we are trying to do with the help of the SCA community. They have been very kind to be able to contribute the minimum, the microservices converted the specification into code, and they have started contributing to a free GitHub open source account for us and everyone else to use, just to reduce the development cost for the changing market. This is the incentive which as Access Health we are able to provide, or we are able to help the community transition smoothly. Next, please. So this is what we recommend with all the experience from different experts in digital health and how the government is changing. We are also part of the government. We also have government partners who are closely working on NDHM. All the new health delivery information system, or HIS, or healthcare products, we say, if they want to be 100% compliant and interoperable, they need to adopt the microservice architecture using the specifications or the health data dictionary that government has put down. It already bundles the required standardization on terminology and other standard application that we already have. We will need to adopt the e-object that we discussed, which will act as the bolt-on layer, and there will be a translator required. There's a need of translator to be able to do the mapping for the MVP elements in the e-object. This will help payers and providers to enable the interoperability amongst them. This is the roadmap for the legacy applications. And government definitely is working on providing a sandbox. Once we are at some stage, government would be launching a sandbox. It may come from NHA, it may come from MOHFW. We don't know the names, but government in the background is working on it, that people can test these MVPs and can test the interoperability, how they make it enable. Next, please. So to be able to take it forward, to be able to help, we had to start somewhere, and that is when we designed the Social Entrepreneurship Accelerator Program. So this accelerator program was for startups and other government partners, as well as other mid-sized vendor organizations who are in healthcare. As part of this program, we provide them the minimum viable product definition as microservice specifications, or the e-object design. We also have techno-functional people, experts in our team, who help them for the mentorship. Basically, we handhold them to a granular level that they can adopt those MVPs. Then once they are done with it, we will try to audit them and or try to test what they have developed and give a stamp of confidence. And then there was market access program, which we had promised, but now what has happened is, with National Health Authority has partnered with us as part of their market access program. Now all the empaneled hospitals that are part of PMJ or Ayushman Bharat becomes accessible to all these startups who adopt these minimum standards. And then there will be POC studies and direct procurement by these either state vendors or state government projects, or by the empaneled hospital that NHA has already. Next, please. So like I explained, we are doing a lot of open source work because the mandate is to help the community, private and public sector leapfrog to a collaborative, interoperable ecosystem. So we have a blog called Open Bodhik. If you visit this blog, you'll be able to get everything about whatever open source work that we have done. You'll be able to get everything, and there are links to the actual design documents or the specifications or the Excel that you can directly utilize as a vendor to be able to start the work of standardization and compliance with NDHP. So we have published many documents by now, and the list is provided here. Yeah. Thank you. I think I'll hand it over to Varun now. Thank you, Varun.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gupta and Priyanka. It was really wonderful to hear from you what this document looks like, what it means for payers and providers. But now for me, after listening to both of you, the food for thought is, I'm still a little bit fuzzy around how do sponsors of digital health actually boil all this information down and make market access a reality, even regulatory access a reality. So while we heard a lot around interoperability between the payers and the providers, there's also an element of interoperability for the organizations that also want to be a part of this ecosystem, especially organizations like who are members at APAC Med, the J&Js, the Roche, the Abbott, the Siemens. Yeah. So I have this pyramid where we can, essentially look at what it means for APAC Med organizations. So of course, we are looking at a clear roadmap for market access for sponsors of digital health technologies in India. That is something that is still not clear. We require fit for purpose regulatory frameworks for digital health products. There's a need for harmonized data standards and infrastructure, even for these players to go in and start operating in this environment as well. And of course, all the data lakes that are already being created by the government of India, how will these data lakes support coverage and reimbursement decisions? And of course, the cost of change also for the PPP model, right? So these are some questions that we have. We have already collected some questions from our members. Maybe I can start asking some of these questions to the panelists, yeah? So thank you very much. So maybe my first question is to Dr. Shravan from Roche Diagnostics India. He's the GM at Roche Diagnostics India. So Shravan, my question would be, what do sponsors of digital health technologies like Roche Diagnostics need from the government of India? And if you can say a few words around specifically for regulatory frameworks that will help expedite this, as well as what's the role of interoperability in all of this for an organization like Roche?
Varun, thank you very much for that question. And really, I have to compliment our previous two speakers for breaking it down in a way that made it quite accessible and understandable for all of us. I'll perhaps answer the second part of your question first and then move on just to put it in context. Now, companies like Roche and indeed any medical device, we've been evolving over the last several years from initially just offering gadgets to now working with a huge amount of data. I'll give the Roche example. Roche has a very rich history of being a leader in various pockets of healthcare, including research and innovation and downstream execution, which touches patients a lot. Over the last decade, we have been pioneering technologies and bringing in data ecosystems that are transforming healthcare, particularly in a few disease areas. Take cancer, for example. And one of our speakers was earlier talking about PHC, personalized healthcare. Now, the PHC journey itself has been evolving. A generation ago, say when I was in medical college, PHC meant something like maybe targeted therapy. That was considered personalized healthcare. But today, as we have more and more data, and as we're trying to identify specific treatments for N of one, for one particular individual, we need a huge amount of data, huge number of population statistics and clinical evidence to support interventions for one particular individual. So in that context, the government of India's vision to foster the use of digital technologies as a means to promote equitable and affordable universal access to healthcare, this is extremely meaningful. It's very much in line with our vision, and I'm sure with other medical device and pharmaceutical companies as well. So as a company, as a global company that is looking at data insights and personalized healthcare, we see the value of this complete ecosystem to fuel high quality research and also access to targeted technologies to support the move towards these patient-centric decision-making tools. Now, I spoke about targeted therapy and in Roche Diagnostics, in the device space, in the lab. Say 10, 15 years ago, it was a struggle to get one analyzer, one medical equipment to talk to another. And this was a huge challenge because if you go into a lab, you're going to see equipment from various manufacturers just in the lab alone. And then you move out of the lab, you have ICU equipment, you have imaging equipment, you have all these coming together. And how do you provide cohesive information to a clinician? There are two very significant applications that we are starting to see today. One is clinical decision support tools, because you have so much information coming at you. How does a clinician make a decision for that N of one patient? And secondly, for clinical trials. I've come across companies around the world where they are actually designing clinical trials without looking at any patients. They're just looking at data, evidence that's coming from different patient sources, different hospitals, which then they are able to anonymize and manipulate for the purpose of generating data and predicting outcomes. Now, if we are able, if we want to reach that phase where we have a wealth of data, how do we make use of it? This interoperability is crucial. There are some barriers, the health information landscape. I think our previous speakers said that so nicely. We need to create that ecosystem for data sharing at scale to realize this full potential. And I really welcome what the NDHB is doing, and you know what was proposed to ensure. So we would really like to propose that we ensure proper implementation of the NDHB, and we need an authority to focus on this. So specifically now, to answer the first part of your question, we would like to see clarification on how the government of India envisages these public-private partnerships and interoperability. We are working, of course, as a company on internal interoperability, but external interoperability remains elusive. So how do we progress towards this, and how do we transcend global borders? How do we look at data privacy? These are all open questions. We don't have easy solutions, but the fact that we're all sitting around the same table and discussing this, and hopefully we have the ear of the government, is going to be crucial to the next phase of personalized healthcare and data interoperability. Thank you, Varun.
Thank you, Shravan. And Shravan, if you can also touch upon a little bit, what would it mean for an organization like Roche from regulatory perspectives, right? What would be an ideal scenario for regulatory frameworks which are really fit for purpose for digital health technology in India?
So first of all, this openness to discuss and have this this awareness is a start, right? That we need to be able to acknowledge and accept some of the best practices from around the world that we're seeing in this space. We do have some companies that are making recommendations. It would be great, just as I mentioned, you know, for us, we are already looking at internal interoperability. But how do we take it to a stage where not just a Roche machine talks to each other, but a Roche machine talks to another machine, and then they talk to a different technology altogether? You talk about a tumor board, for example. It's meaningless unless different categories of equipment are able to talk together. So we need a clear regulatory access pathway for the niche products that are being developed. We need a process for safeguarding the digital health technology sponsors as well as the patient population in India. We need cyber security framework for medical devices, and medical devices so broad, including in vitro diagnostics. And so this overall health technology systems, they need to be incorporated into this. So and then finally, we need a clear framework for interoperability that promotes the public and private partnership of data. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you very much, Shravan. That was a very good answer, and I think this will give a lot of direction also to APAC Med, while APAC Med is setting up some of the advocacy efforts in India. So that is very good and much appreciated, Shravan. Thank you. So Dr. Pankaj, we have a question from one of our attendees. Maybe I can direct this one to you. So this one is from Cindy. So the question is, by when will the government of India be able to leverage some of the data analytics and clinical outcomes for patients, which is actually required for implementing value-based healthcare in India? So is there like a timeline that the government of India has put on this so that everything is expedited for the sake of bringing most value to the patient?
Thank you, Varun. Very interesting question. And we are living in unprecedented times today. So when the pandemic hit us a couple of months back, we were caught completely unaware. And that has accelerated the adoption and also the government's regulatory push. So it's sort of served as an accelerator for adoption. And now the target is very clear. We need the data for epidemiological analysis. If you need the data for epidemiological analysis, all the things that I spoke about, including the software, hardware, the platforms, the support functions, all of them have to come together. And adoption has to happen across the board. Only then we will be able to make sense out of all the different pieces of data. And government now, and thankfully we have a very strong leadership at the top. Modi ji is pushing very hard and saying, I want it as of yesterday. However, there is time that is required to put all the building blocks in place and all that. So before the pandemic hit us, in November 2019, there was a roadmap that was put out together with the NDHB, but I don't think that roadmap holds any longer, because we have to work on a much more accelerated pace than we initially thought. So now, what is the latest thinking? It's still emerging, but then, we need it ASAP.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pankaj. That is very helpful. Priyanka, I have a question for you. So change management and cost would be really critical for successful implementation of this plan for the government. So who would be bearing the cost of this deployment? Priyanka, you're on mute.
Thank you, Varun. So yes, we completely agree there will be a cost of change that will everyone has to incur. But because government is already providing you incentive through the PMJ, which is the UHC for India, 40% to 80%, we won't even know when it will switch. Automatically, each of the hospitals will become empaneled with it. You get faster claim payment. That is an incentive right now government is promising to you, so that it makes everyone's life easier. Because in India, the problem is the claimant of claims, which is a major hurdle. Why they avoid empaneling with any of the government schemes. But this problem will be completely sorted, and if we are able to solve out, a lot of incentive can be given to them. Rest other incentives are will be realized over the period of time, with be able to have access to data, patient care, improved health outcomes. But this is which act as the financial lever.
Thank you, Priyanka. So I think this conversation around incentives is very interesting, and I think it's only right that I also ask this question to Rohit and Ajay, who are also on our panel. Has the government of India identified some incentives for SMEs to operate in this digital health ecosystem that has been envisioned for India?
So I will take up this question. So if you ask in terms of direct financial reimbursement from Government of India, the answer is no. But if you look at the soft benefits and other benefits that hospitals as well as service providers are getting out of these digital implementations are manifold. So we work with mainly super specialty hospitals who are like tertiary care in cancer, cardiac, orthopedic, in all those areas. So one of the benefits we have seen is in the finance side. So if you take financing of healthcare, first their disallowance from insurance company has come down drastically. Before the implementation of IT, it was in the vicinity of 15 to 20%. Now we have reduced it to near zero, disallowance from insurance company. Then it has led to very good transparency with the donors and the charity institutions. Cancer care is a long drawn process. It is very costly process. So by having a proper system which instills confidence to the donors and charity, they are more inclined to fund it. Like now Yuvraj Singh Foundation has come and so many HDFC Bank Trust has come for cancer patient. So they are very willing and forthcoming if we present the entire electronic medical record as well as health record in a very transparent manner. So one is that they are getting from insurance companies full reimbursement, and then these donors and charity institutions are also very forthcoming and very confident in funding those hospitals. Then Government of India made one provision which directly impacts it, that those hospitals which have good IT systems, they get NABH accreditation quickly, and then they get 10 to 15% markup for the same treatment if it is done by them compared to done by a healthcare provider who doesn't have proper IT infrastructure and NABH accreditation. So they get this 10 to 15% additional markup while reimbursement from insurance company and even in Ayushman Bharat scheme. So that's a very big incentive for them to go for it. And to top it all, the better interfacing, like some places we have done with the Roche Steiner machine also, then we have done microbiology lab interfacing. So what has happened, this AI, the power of AI is being used. Analysis, better analysis are coming forward from those hospitals. So they are upgrading themselves from a just treatment center to a research center. So they are attracting research grants from abroad, research grants from Government of India, as well as clinical trials is happening, and that is bringing additional revenue to them. And that is leading to better name and fame for them globally. So they get better referral also in the patients. So this will be my summarization of what all benefits people are getting out of implementing proper digital healthcare. And especially this Ayushman Bharat and NABH accreditation, 10% markup is like direct benefit. Rest all are soft benefit, which people are reaping, and they are very happy once it's implemented properly.
Varun, I hope you can hear me. Actually, Ajay put it very nicely and in a concise way. In fact, I sort of refer to what Shravan, Dr. Pankaj, Priyanka also mentioned about knowing the sort of finer details of the digital blueprint and how it is going to impact each and every sort of element of the ecosystem. Having said that, is there a direct sort of incentive? I don't think so, but there was not supposed to be perhaps once. I think what is expected of the government is to actually take on this initiative on a rather large scale, make it so much aware to the ecosystem that people like us who are wanting to be fiduciaries can take up a decisive role in sort of implementing this whole agenda. Having said that, we are in so it always happens. The medtech, health tech, medical equipment space, they evolved much before these guidelines or interoperability was discussed by the government in terms of creating a digital ecosystem. We also started developing a sort of a work in progress PHR system in 2017. Happy to know that the government is now looking at making it a mandate. So as soon as government sort of take a decisive step in terms of making it a reality, and the ecosystem to know about it, I think the awareness and everything else will also make our roles very, very prominent and visible. And that is, I think, is what we expect from the government. Incentive, however, is basically is a byproduct, and it will come by as soon as we have understood our roles and we start developing our product and offerings accordingly and deliver it. And it's a huge market. It's a big ocean to sort of steer, not limited to one or two. Perhaps it would require hundreds of us to come sort of play a vital role and deliver, to the requirements. So yes, that's what I want to say.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rohit and Ajay. That was it's important that we hear from SMEs as well, because SMEs we see will play a major role in this ecosystem. So with that, Roberta, I will hand it back to you to say the final words before we close this.
Thank you very much, Varun. Yeah, let me thank the speakers for this wonderful session. I think we all learned a lot. This is an important piece for us in the Digital Health Committee. And thanks a lot for this wonderful panel discussion. So I think I know we would like to ask more to all of you, but the time is now almost over. So I have to thank all of you, and I hope to work again with you at APACMed in the future. And to all the attendees, thanks for joining us today. You will find the recording of this webinar and also the deck. I know some of you already asked it will be available on our website quite soon. I mean, I think before tomorrow. And keep looking at our LinkedIn account for more webinars, because we have regular ones on digital health on several aspects. So I hope to see you all again very soon. Thank you all again, and have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.